hot button issue here. Shedeur Sanders, his debut was fantastic overall, I think, for the Browns. Shedeur looked very comfortable, 2 touchdowns, probably his best throws of the day. Finished 14 of 23, $138, 2 touchdowns, as I mentioned. Also scrambled a couple times and looked pretty good from a movement perspective. What were your initial thoughts on Shedeur Sanders? We did an instant reaction right after the show, and listen, the people want to discuss Shedeur Sanders. I would say it's one of the biggest. It's the biggest, somewhat random.
When was the last time a 5th-round pick had this kind of?
I mean, that's unfair to say it like that,
around them.
I would say it's the most individual player hype on both ends of the spectrum since Tim Tebow, where no matter what happened, right? Like Tim Tebow would go 2 for 15 in a game, and people are like, you don't believe he's a leader, he's this, he's that, or he would lead this incredible comeback and actually have some good plays, and somebody would be like, no, he's terrible, he's got this long throwing motion. But more so on the other side, there were just some unbelievable Tebow believers and fanatics.
Always. And still
no matter where he signed.
There are people that will be like, he could have made it. He was a victim of the system.
I still believe he could play tight end for Urban Meyer. I still believe he could play outfield for the Mets. Like, there are still believers. The same thing with Shedeur Sanders, to the point where if you say one negative thing, I didn't really like this one pass, it's like, no, you don't believe in Shedeur. You're just, So it's as hot button, I think, as Tebow right now.
Yeah, it really is. It's wild discourse. Like, it is dangerous out there in the Twitter jungle tweeting about Shedeur Sanders, because people are just looking for anything. If you tweet anything that isn't universal praise coming off the back of this game, you're a hater, you want him to fail, you hate the Sanders, you're mad at Dillon, like all that kind of stuff, right? Conversely, if you're like, praising anything in the game, it's like, well, come on, this is preseason, it's meaningless, it's blah, blah. So, look, I think we're on fairly safe ground on this show as impartial, middle-of-the-road, rational take givers. And when it comes to Shedeur, both of us ranked him as QB2 in this draft, right? I said he was closer to QB1 than he was the rest of the pack, the Jackson Darts, the Tyler Shucks of the world. I thought the Browns should have taken him at 2 overall. I also think they did a great job getting him in the 5th round when they decided not to do that, when their approach was to basically bail on quarterback in this draft until lower down. Even after drafting Dillon Gabriel, eventually they got to the 5th and decided, what the hell? Let's roll the dice. Like, what's the worst that could happen at this point? Let's take a shot at it, right? So I kind of liked all of that. And all that goes to say, look, he didn't win the job based off this game, but he was given an unusual opportunity where he still, or certainly going into this game, he was probably QB4 in the depth chart. He had been getting very little, if anything, in terms of like first-team reps during training camp. He's behind Dillon Gabriel, who was drafted 2 rounds ahead of him. He's behind Joe Flacco, who's the presumed number 1 quarterback going into the regular season. And he was behind Kenny Pickett, who was just, a guy on the roster. But 2 of those guys were out with a hamstring heading into this game, and the other one is old man Flacco, who they're probably not going to play in much, if any, of preseason because he's going to be the week 1 starter. So all of a sudden, Shedeur gets this weird opportunity to say, hey, you're getting the start in preseason week 1, and by the way, you're probably going to play most of the game because the only other option available signed like 2 days ago. So go out there and have fun. And he did. He went out there with that rare gift of a quarterback who actually wants a chunk of preseason snaps and played well, looked in charge, looked in control, looked poised relative to the situation, and definitely raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, and look, my takeaway on a lot of the quarterbacks is they looked a lot like they did 8-9 months ago, a lot like they did in the draft process. I thought Shedeur Sanders, accuracy-wise, was very good. His first touchdown, thread the needle, between 2 defenders, was outstanding. I thought his pocket movement on the second touchdown and then finding the open man, nice scheme, and then Shedeur, bought time because there was quick pressure there. I thought that was outstanding as well. A couple plays where he was trying to evade defenders, wasn't able to do it, but I don't think it was detrimental. I think that was a big question. Man coverage early on, he reads it, he's got nothing there, he picks up a first down with his legs. So yeah, there was some really nice accurate throws in there. I thought he was okay managing the pocket, had a few nice plays in there. And overall, it's extremely positive. It was against a couple series against the Panthers starters. It wasn't that exclusively.
Right.
They had a short field after a turnover on one of those on that first touchdown. So overall, it was extremely positive. And I think the bottom line is when we say, look, Dillon Gabriel's ahead of him on the depth chart, that's been the truth to this point. The Browns also drafted Dillon Gabriel ahead of Shedeur Sanders. But what we said way back in our, hey, what should happen this year? For me, the best case scenario for the Browns is Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel plays as much football as possible. Whoever plays better wins the job. At some point, you don't want Joe Flacco as your starting quarterback because one of these rookies has played so well that you don't need to see what you have in almost 40-year-old Joe Flacco. You want to see what you have in the rookies because, oh, by the way, you've got 2 first-round picks next year, and there's a lot more quarterbacks coming out. So I think Shedeur, at the very least, has earned way more reps with the 1s and the 2s, and challenge him. Challenge these rookies and see what you can get out of them. As far as the challenge goes, Shedeur passed this first test with the Browns backups going up against the Panthers ones for a little bit. He absolutely passed the first test.
Yeah, so that's an important piece of context. He was working with a second and third string unit throughout this game. At least to start with, he went up against the Panthers' starting defense, albeit minus a player or two. And look, this is like people will try and minimize that as a thing because, the Panthers had a bad defense last year. It's like that conversation of would the worst team in the NFL beat Alabama in a given year? The worst team in the NFL would stomp Alabama by 50
Baylor.
points.
Right. They're better than Texas Tech.
They would stomp the best college team by 30, 40, 50 points every single year, right? That's the gulf between those two. So the worst starting unit in the NFL is significantly better than a backup unit, right? That's the difference we're talking about here. And, okay, he went 3 and out in that first drive. He shouldn't have, though. Like, the third down conversion, he put the ball in the right place. The tight end bobbled it, didn't run to the sticks either, so it was half a yard short.
And I think if he catches it cleanly, it's a first
Probably
down.
a first down as well. But certainly he could have caught it cleanly or he could have run himself past the marker. Either one of those things probably makes that a first down. The point is, Shedeur put the ball where it needed to be a first down on that play, didn't get rewarded for it. But that's a significant thing. And then he went out there and played well. Overall, I mean, look, this is the narrative about him at draft time was this is probably the most accurate quarterback in this draft. His big problem is what happens. Look at all his sort of behavior under pressure and look at how much pressure he was under behind a god-awful offensive line at Colorado. The question was, what happens when you change the volume of pressure he's under? And at least in this game, you saw a bit of that, right? The tendencies are still there for some, not necessarily ideal behavior under pressure, running backwards, trying to play, trying to get away from things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it's not going to. But I think already you saw, if you just dial down the amount he's under pressure, you see a much more calm, behaved, poised version of Shedeur Sanders in the pocket generally, because that kind of thing has an effect. But the point you made is critical, right? Like, what is your takeaway from this? Well, the takeaway isn't Shedeur is amazing. He's going to be the number 1 quarterback of this draft. He's going to the Hall of Fame, right? The take is, okay, the Browns should be looking at this and saying, we need to have a look at him now, seriously, like as an option. Before, it's like, sure, we'll roll the dice, but he's 4th on the depth chart and getting no reps. Now it's like he just showed you he deserves reps. So if you're not looking at this coming out of this game as Cleveland and saying, let's give him some first-team looks, let's give him a real chance to move himself up the depth chart, well, now you're doing him a disservice.
Hey guys, real quick, only 40% of our viewers are actually subscribed, so let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and now let's get back to the action. The one other thing I'll add, we all said, like, have you ever seen this for a 5th-round pick? He's not your typical 5th-round pick because the consensus, the expectation was that he was going to go in the first. Now, you could say, well, the consensus was wrong, the media was wrong, but there's still enough people, like any quarterback, there was enough people that probably said he's a 1st-round caliber quarterback. At worst, a 2nd-round type of quarterback. And then he falls because of off-field, whatever happens, right? Plus a little bit of scarcity. At the end of the day, though, the goal is to get the most productive football players. And if the thing that made him fall isn't so much the on-field, if he's producing on the field, then the Browns have to give him those opportunities, right? Continue to prove us wrong, right? Continue to prove the entire NFL wrong that you were on your way to going undrafted. We stopped the slide in round 5 and just continue to prove it wrong. And if the reason that he fell eventually comes back to bite, then it comes back to bite. Fine. but give him opportunities.
Well, it's a really weird dynamic because, I don't think anybody would tell you that he was a fifth round. Well, not anybody. Okay. Most people would not argue that he was a fifth round player based purely off the tape, right? The reason he fell that far is because of the circus that comes with him. And whether that is thinking that Dillon would be more involved than he appears to be right now, whether that was simply what we're talking about, that he's like the most polarizing, hyped, person in the NFL since Tim Tebow, right?
Or that Nike was doing celebration tweets after a two-touchdown preseason game.
It's just however you want to term it, and this does not necessarily mean it's his fault, right? But this comes with him. So I'm sure there are plenty of teams that simply did not want to deal with this at all, right? Regardless of how good you think the quarterback is. And if you don't think he's great to begin with, you certainly don't want any part of this. And that's why even at draft time, people were saying once he gets out of the first round, once he gets beyond, the Saints at the top of the second, he's going to fall for a while because the math changes. Now he's a backup, and do you want this as a backup? Again, doesn't mean it's his fault, but do you want Nike hyping up your backup quarterback when he makes a pass in random third string training reps, right? No, most teams don't. So that changes everything. However, the Browns chose Dillon Gabriel ahead of Shedeur Sanders. So even if you say, look, he's better than a fifth-round pick on the field, and the Browns sort of went out there and said, we actually think Dillon Gabriel in the mid to low rounds is a better option than Shedeur Sanders. So he's in this weird spot where he has to overcome a guy that his own team effectively said is better as a prospect.
Right. And look, eventually the on-field play is all that matters, but they're going to give Dillon Gabriel opportunities because just as of 2 weeks ago, they thought he was a better option.
Yeah.
And so how much has actually changed?
And I also think, because Dillon Gabriel was a third-round draft pick, that's a high enough pick that he's almost certainly safe on the roster. I don't really see a world where Dillon Gabriel gets cut heading into the season. I think there was absolutely a world where Shedeur Sanders gets cut heading into the season. But I also think the roster spot to claim this year, if he continues this kind of play in preseason, is not Gabriel's. He might claim his spot in the depth chart, but he's not claiming his roster spot. The roster spot to claim belongs to Kenny Pickett.
Yes, absolutely.
What I think the target for, obviously QB1 is down the road. In my opinion, Joe Flacco is almost nailed on as the week one starter. The starting job to be had is in the October world, right? When Flacco eventually plays his way to the bench, then you're first man in. That's how I imagine the QB1 going. The dynamic that Shedeur is chasing is, number one, make the roster. Number two, jump Dillon Gabriel to be the first guy off the bench when Flacco plays his way to the bench. That I think is his. That should be his target now for the next while. Gabriel, same thing, right? I think you're safe on the roster, but he's now under pressure to play well to keep his potential number two spot.
I think you've summed it up extremely well. The final thing I'll say, for those defending Shedeur Sanders and any sort of criticism against him, you need to look to Shedeur, who graded his own performance a C+.
Yes.
He is a Shedeur Sanders.
Shedeur Sanders is the most honest take giver.
He is a Shedeur Sanders hater. Shedeur himself.
No, he's the most honest person out there because it wasn't perfect, right? There was a play that could have been intercepted, which, the wide receiver didn't do a great job of working back to it. However, it was behind him anyway, and he would have been in trouble even if the wide receiver had done a perfect job on it. That wasn't great. Early in the game, he felt like he was calibrated a little bit high on ball location. I think the adrenaline was getting to him and he was sailing things a little bit. He had, there were a couple of plays. He took a sack against the blitz where even if, again, a wide receiver screwed him a little bit, you got to know that's coming. You got to get rid of the ball, got to throw it away. That was a criticism of his pre-draft. So it wasn't perfect. C+, maybe a little bit harsh, but, it wasn't like, oh, look at him. He's like, some of the hype, which is not his fault, people are losing the absolute run of themselves and being like, this kid's a star. He's a super. This is the best preseason performance we've seen. It was a good preseason debut. It wasn't great. It wasn't, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before. It was, good work. That was a solid preseason debut, and you absolutely raised some eyebrows doing it.
And just full disclosure, we will continue to talk about Shedeur Sanders because people care and people watch and listen.
Yeah.
We will just continue to bring the honest, lukewarm takes without the extreme views that you might see on the shouty
The
shows.
last point I would make, by the way, is if he does become a starter, win a starting job, outperform everybody, blah, 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 this is a phenomenal endorsement of the thing you said for years and what the Browns apparently decided this year, which is just take shots on quarterbacks, even if you don't think that guy is the guy. Like the Browns clearly in the draft effectively said, we do not believe Shedeur Sanders is a franchise quarterback. If they did, they would have either drafted him at 2 overall, or they'd have come back into the first round at
or
taken
34,
him, or they'd have drafted him in the
third round.
Yeah,
Yeah,
know what I
somewhere.
mean? They would have done several things along the way that weren't what they did. The fact that they passed on him so many times, then drafted Dillon Gabriel ahead of him, says we don't believe that Shedeur Sanders is a starting quarterback in the NFL. The fact that they then decided in the 5th round, you know what? What's the downside to rolling the dice anyway? What if we're wrong? What if Shedeur actually is the player we don't think he is? That is phenomenally smart process, because maybe you will be wrong and he's going to go out there and perform like he did in this game. And if he does that every single game from this point on and is a really good quarterback, you pick this guy up in the 5th round, even though you didn't think he had any chance of doing that.
And that's
smart.
And if you hit 10% of those, because I said the same thing about Kellen Mond or the chat's asking about Hendon Hooker.
Right.
The point is, what's the base rate? You're going to miss 9 out of 10. You might miss 19 out of 20, but the payoff is so valuable.
Yes.
If Shedeur Sanders is the starter for the Browns, and if he's good enough that a team that has 2 first-round picks
Doesn't
next
have to
year
use them.
decides, you know what? Shedeur was so good as a rookie.
This is what
We
the
don't
Eagles
need Garrett Nussmeier. We don't need Lenore Sellers. Actually, you're not even picking at the top, Then the payoff is so incredible, where the alternative is a backup linebacker, special teamer, so that you absolutely take chances on quarterbacks.
I mean, that's what the Eagles did, right? They positioned themselves to have 2 first-round draft picks the year after they gave Jalen Hurts the starting gig, because if Jalen Hurts didn't get any better, they were going to need to draft a quarterback at the top of that draft. The fact that he did, and they were then able to use those 2 first-round draft picks to go nuts in the draft, and it's like, oh, look, how he's making magic happen. Like, it's so smart. And maybe there's an argument to say, how high in the draft you want to roll that dice. Like maybe the 3rd round is too high to say take a shot on a quarterback you don't believe in, right? But the 5th round, I think you're seeing, is absolutely worth it, particularly if you can, trade back somewhere in the first 4 rounds and get yourself an extra 5th or whatever. Just somewhere on day 3, grab a quarterback you don't believe in, right? Because what if you're wrong? Maybe he's the guy.
Brock Purdy, or they become that guy.
I mean, maybe the actual strategy should be grab one you do believe in, but if one you don't,
keep taking them.
Yeah, if one you do believe in isn't available to you, grab one you don't believe in.
Even one you don't believe in,
because you might be wrong.
Yeah, because you're probably wrong most of the time. So it's good.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
Check the Mic is live every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So be sure to hit this subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.
The all-knowing algorithm is convinced that you'll like these videos as well, and frankly, who are we to argue?